I'm still in the process of contacting some people to get them on stream to talk about these Warlock changes. Not even actual Warlocks, just people who have takes on how it'll affect the other shit. Hello. Young THD? No, not THD. Because I think the conversation is less about how it affects Warlocks and more what it means for the game when you change something that impactful late into a season. And then it also begs the question of, are you changing something for the MDI or for High Mythic Plus and not the rest of the community? And also another topic is, you know, I think everyone involved would clearly say that like Warlocks needed to get nerfed, but why did it take this long? And also, Survival Hunter, if you like take away the fact that Destro is getting PI'd in these keys, like Survival Hunter is like just as good. Right, so, and the fact they did it right before MDI is interesting. Like, I wonder if they keep that in mind, or I wonder if they did that on purpose. Like, I wonder, and this is what I want to talk about with people, is do you think they did it because the MDI was coming up? And if that's the case, that might just be another case of them misunderstanding what players want. Like, I mean, you guys have heard me talk about it before, right? Where anytime they've made a decision and it's been with the Race to World First in mind, like them trying to make a change for the World First Raiders even, every single one of those decisions is a nightmare, and they're frequently have no idea how to actually make changes like that. And they go in with a misconception of what we want or how we work, and then they make decisions for us that negatively affect us and everyone else. So I wonder if this is a scenario where that's happening with the MDI. Let's see. The whole timeline for Destro buffs and nerfs is pretty funny. Random 5% blanket buff into trying to normalize it. Yeah, clearly, like, whoever's balancing that spec doesn't really know how it works. You could tell from the buffs that they did earlier in the patch. Nagura hasn't answered me, so I'm going to just add Dorki, Yumi TV, and Kalamazi. That sounds fun. Okay, so what we're going to talk about are the Warlock nerfs and what that means for like mythic. So the thing that I want to talk about, again, it's always very casual. Dorki and Growl have done a few of these, but timing is a big question. Like why they're doing it is a big question. Like who they're actually doing this nerf for. I've heard people say it's like an MDI thing, it's a High Mythic Plus thing. There's also other suspect classes. There's the very common trope amongst casual players, and it's really stupid, by the way. And they're like, why ever nerf anything? Just buff everything else while there's 36 specs in the game. Just basically any of that. What do you guys think about these nerfs?
Let's first hear what exactly the nerfs are, Kalamazi, because
I
think that's
saw
what everyone wants to know.
Yeah,
like everyone wants to know exactly.
Give us some projections.
What's happening with Lock?
I mean, so basically, the Destruction 4-piece grants you a talent called Rain of Chaos. The 4 pieces, whenever you spend 10 shards, like through Rain of Fires or Chaos Bolts, you get a free Chaos Bolt or Rain of Fire, which gives you basically a big purple Infernal. It's called the Blasphemy. And the Blasphemy brings with it Rain of Chaos talent as long as you're spec'd into it. And Rain of Chaos says when your Infernal's active, every shard you spend has a 15% chance to summon an extra Infernal that also lasts 8 seconds. So basically, like, the 4-piece enables like these insane loops of synergy with like ridiculous shard generation, a million Rain of Fire cast, just insane immolation war damage, which is what the Infernal's pulse from Rain of Chaos, the Blasphemy does from the 4-piece, and your main player-bound Infernal. And the more Rain of Fire cast you cast, as long as you're playing our cooldown reduction legendary, which is Willifrid's, the shorter your main Infernal is. So what you've seen with Destro locks over the course of like the last 3 months, however long it's been, is basically them just chaining like permanent Rain of Chaos or near permanent Rain of Chaos and keys, because if you go in and drop your main player bound Infernal with Rain of Chaos of talent, it gives you a half a minute of that, so 30 seconds. But if you proc a 4-piece in that, it extends it by 8 seconds. So what was initially a half a minute damage window of Rain of Chaos ends up being like on a large pull, like a Halls of Atonement, or really anything in general where you're just going in and pulling a lot. It gives you a minute or longer of Rain of Chaos, which that in conjunction with cooldown reduction gives you your main Infernal back, which then adds half a minute onto Rain of Chaos again, and it just chains as long as you're staying in combat in Mythic Plus, which is why you see the big degenerate pulls of a million mobs just being AoE down and Warlocks having ludicrous damage, which is amplified by other talents to give more shard gen from more targets. So it scales exponentially to a certain point when it's capped, and that's basically where we're at.
I'm not gonna.
They're removing.
I'm probably gonna throw a in
Rain
here
of Chaos
soon.
ability from the 4-piece this Tuesday, which means basically you'll have your half a minute Infernal and that's it, or half a minute Rain of Chaos and that's it from your player bound Infernal. No chaining possibility.
Wait, sorry. That was just like way too much Warlock talk for me. I
Yeah,
have
so
no idea
like,
what you just
okay,
said. Just
so
give me
so
the numbers.
so I heard something. No, here I heard something
Gotcha.
from Shelly, and he said that basically like warlocks are. This is like what stupid people like me can understand who have no idea what the fuck you just said.
I think I know what he's
Where-
gonna say. Don't worry.
No, yeah, is that you still crank in 2 minutes, but outside of the pulls where you have your CDs, you just don't do 60k anymore. It's probably much closer to like an in between pull, like a earlier.
Yeah.
I compare. It sounds like a lot what Frosty K is. So I've like done a lot of keys with Warlock, and I can do as much as Warlock on a big pull. But in between pulls, they just crank you into oblivion, like they just destroy you, and that's the thing that's going to be less now. Is that correct?
Yeah, essentially we're like a 1.5 to 2 minute class now instead of a permanent damage class. It's sort of how like Lock was played in like 9.0 and 9.1, like in the MDI, like in those very niche keys like halls with massive pulls. You can still do that, but you can't do it every pull. It'll be like every 1.5 to 2 minutes. You don't have the chain possibility anymore of just infinite damage every pull. So yeah, it's pretty accurate.
Well, so from what I've heard, it matters less when you're doing constant big pulls. Is that true? Like, do you just still keep more of whatever the hell you have going on?
It does, yeah. There's a talent called Inferno, which whenever you cast Rain of Fire, it increases the damage of it and has a 20% chance to give you a shard fragment back whenever Rain of Fire hits a target. So if you're hitting 10 targets, you have more chances to get that shard fragment back. And more shard fragments back means more Rain of Fire cast, which reduces the cooldown of your main Infernal. So like large pulls do still reduce, make it less of a thing, but it's still going to be decently noticeable. Probably going to go from having like a 90%, 80 to 90% Rain of Chaos uptime, which is like the big damage amp, more Infernals, to like, it's hard to say, a lot less. You can't chain that the whole key anymore. So it's more like you're a Windwalker, I guess. I think Shelly compared it to. We have like bigger 2 minutes and smaller like 1 minute CDs, I think, instead of a huge damage profile the entire time. But larger pulls do make a bit of a difference, yeah.
Okay.
Do you think your 2 minutes will be even bigger now than they were before, but then once it runs out, then you do way less?
No, they're
think-
the same.
The same, okay.
Yeah, they're the same. They're buffing like 4 abilities like Immolate, Incinerate, Conflagrate, and Chaos Bolt, but those aren't used really in AoE. You cast a couple Incinerates or Conflagrates to generate shards if you're not getting some back, like due to bad RNG, but that's so minuscule, it's negligible. It'll be the same with 2 minutes, but just much less in between until you get your big Infernal
What
back.
about like boss damage, like just pure single target, like the
I
long
was gonna say
triangle
that
fight?
too.
It's awkward because you're playing Reign of Chaos in those settings too. So like you drop your main player run Infernal, which gives you half a minute, but you would still chain 4-piece procs, which would make that window go from half a minute to like 46-ish seconds, like 50. It's going to hurt a bit in single target too. You're not going to have the same sustained longevity of single target. It's not as big as AoE at all, but it'll hurt a bit. The actual like.
Do you think it's gonna be a
cross
nerf in
everybody
single
else.
target as well? Pretty significant.
The abilities like Immolate, Incinerate, Conflagrate, and Chaos Bolt being buffed do help in single target, but I mean, I ran some sims last night and everything. It is a bit of a single target loss. Yeah. It looks to be like, I think it was like about 1,000 DPS, roughly. It varies depending on the build you're playing, but there's some things being changed in sims now too. It should be a bit less. I think it's like 700 is what people are thinking, roughly.
All right, so I think all of us probably agree, without pointing the finger at any other class, that Warlocks probably needed to be tuned down in single target, or sorry, in Mythic Plus. I wonder if this is actually the right time to do this, or if they're even going to fall out of meta in Mythic Plus. Because I don't know like how many other like strong options are there that still give you health stones, which are insane. They're tanky, they live. It's not like a third melee, which I don't know if that's like still a problem.
Okay, so here's the thing that I noticed about Mythic Plus meta is a class is good, and everyone's like, oh, why is this class good? It's like, well, you know, they name off all of the different things that the class has, but it's like every class has a bunch of things, right? Like, very few classes are good enough, or none, except for maybe Rogue, you could argue, is good enough to be brought just because of the things. At the end of the day, you're always bringing a class because it does the most damage or it does the most healing. So, like, it is literally, if Warlock is not doing the most damage, then it will not be brought, and people won't care.
Well,
about it
a lot of
at all.
times it's not just about overall damage too. Like a lot of times you'll bring Sub-Rogue, for example. Like not
Well,
because of
right,
utility,
but damage
because
is
of
damage, right?
their-
Yeah,
I
obviously
will
it's a
say,
lot more
though-
complicated than that, but
I will say there is a like if you look at like the outliers in this specific Mythic Plus season, it really does feel like there's like 3 or maybe 4 classes, DPS classes that are, this is before the Warlock nerf, that were like super far ahead. But like after that, there is like it definitely evens out for like total damage and keys, like big time. And I wonder if, because like you're saying, like classes will always be brought because they do the most damage. I think like that's also because in Mythic Plus, there's always like 3 or 4 classes that are just destroying everyone else. But if it's like we were talking about this earlier, like if it's actually a 1%, like I'm talking a 1% difference in a key between like your total damage and someone else's total damage, then things like health stones or a group defensive, like some random shit like AMZ or rallying cry or something like that, where that can actually be, or yeah, that can be something that matters. But I'm not saying that's where it is now, by the way. I'm just saying like if I think they're not too far off of that. Like I think if you nuke down survival and Windwalker, really unlikely at this point in the season to do that. I think you actually could see that line of thinking come into play more.
Yeah, will it ever be at that state?
Yeah, probably not. Like, I mean, it never has. It literally never has.
Right. Yeah. So I understand like your point of like, oh, in a fairy tale world where every class is within X%, like, is that what happens? Probably, but like, man, M+ is a mini game. Like, it's not balanced around that. It'll never be where every class is like within 1 or 2%. And the other thing is like, classes like Warlock or classes like Survival Hunter look so good is because all the best people are playing them, right? Like, if you have the best people, or like, for example, like you, right? Like, you're playing Frost DK. A lot of people would consider Frost DK dead, but like, imagine if you just for whatever reason decided to do like 2 super hard push weeks where you're like playing 10 hours a day. Like, I'm pretty sure you would be like shredding, right? Like, by the end of the 2 weeks, like, you would make Frost DK look like it's somewhat reasonable, right? But just nobody does that. Like, nobody goes, oh, I'm gonna play Frost DK for 2 really hard weeks, or maybe one guy does, right? Or
it's
2
the same.
guys do,
It's the same thing in Raid, where if you
Right.
have certain classes, like, it's always going to like the when you look at a spread of classes, just picture a Warcraft log statistics page where you just see every class and spec and a bar next to it. Those lines are always much closer to each other, because the ones at the very bottom, not only are they a little undertuned, but they're also, every like reasonable, really good player in today's day and age is actually going to swap to one of the things at the top. So it makes those bottoms bars smaller and the ones at the top bigger, because all the best players are playing them. And a lot of people maybe don't understand that, but there is definitely like a very big skill difference in doing damage in this game between players. Like, it's like a very casual opinion that like, you know, oh, you just like swap to this and you just play. Like, no, there's like huge damn skill differences in that. So like the player base bottom re-rolling definitely makes a big difference.
Yeah, it's everything. It's not just damage too. It's a really common thing where people would come into my chat and they're like, man, have you seen the top warrior is only rank X, right? Like, you know, let's say rank 49 or like 69. And then I'm like, yeah, well, yeah, obviously, because that guy is not as good as, say, now, for example. I guarantee you, if someone really good playing that tank, like now, you would see that class easily in at least top 20. Like, the class is not that bad. It's just there's nobody good, or there's nobody who's willing to play with that class that is like at that level.
Yeah, I would go way
matter if
further
that
and say
person-
like top 5. Like, now would literally be
like,
top 5 tank in the world. Whatever tank that he played, he would be top 5. Would he be
Literally,
trolling
if
his
they
team a
swap
little
spots,
bit?
too.
Maybe, but yeah.
Yeah.
Like, if you swap the number 1 warrior with the number 1 DK in the world right now, I guarantee you that warrior player would still be lower than the DK. And I'm not even trying to flame the warrior, it's just how it is.
There are people who like very religiously don't multi-class, and they are like the very, like, I think Evade is a good example. So like, he's playing survival this patch, but he's always had a survival hunter even when they were bad. He's just always really liked the class. He's someone where like he'll be as good as anyone always on Demon Hunter even when it's bad. But like, those players that you just mentioned, like you use that warrior, the top ranked warrior, for example, right? Like, those players are extremely rare, and like almost none of them exist. Like the for every evade that's like the fucking insane as good as any player in the game skill level that just mains one class and doesn't swap off, there's 50 more that are that good and are willing to swap off on the patch based on the balance. Well, not 50 more, because there's probably not 50 people as good as that guy. But yeah, it's the just the number thing. Okay, so let's talk about the timing. So this was something that I talked about earlier, and I think it's like a total pipe dream. But my take after like talking through this with myself a lot was just, there needs to, for this game, with how complicated it is, especially compared to other MMOs, with how much is going on in PvE, there's no game that has nearly as much or nearly as many specs. This game just needs much more frequent balance updates. And I think it's like weekly or bi-weekly at the absolute latest. It needs to happen. I don't think it will, because like where would that just come out of nowhere? Like that clearly isn't the case right now. But this came way too late in the patch. People are saying like this caps keys, like no one will be able to time a higher key than there is right now. People have always said that in previous ones. This time that might be true, but in the past I have definitely heard people make that statement, and people still just with more time and effort will like add a key level to a key. But I wonder what you guys think about the timing of this nerf, and maybe why they made this nerf, and like who they made it for.
I feel like this nerf. So Destro was nerfed like 2 months ago, I think, somewhere around there. I can't even remember what the nerf was, but it was nerfed like a month and a half, 2 months ago, trying to address like the insane shard gen. It was even crazier at the start of the season. I think the issue lies in the fact that Destro's 2-piece and 4-piece came out on PTR, like in a really subpar form, and it got overhauled to this, which guaranteed consistency and brought random chaos like the last few weeks of PTR, like the last week of raid testing, and then from what I remember, and then nobody really did a whole lot with it, and it went live, and it was pretty wild. And since then, they've been trying to adjust, like for the shard gen and everything, just based on what the 4-piece does. I feel like me personally, it's a bit frustrating. I don't run 30 keys and stuff. I do 23s, and that maybe just chill at this point. But I feel like at this point the nerfs are just. I think it's too late in the season, personally. I mean, you've got the MDI coming up in a few weeks, which, I mean, I don't run, I'm not a part of the MDI, but I would assume teams have already prepped their comps and planned things out route-wise based around Warlock, like Destro lock, CDs and things, polls based around them. Even when it comes to retail, you've got teams that are pushing for the top, 0.1 or 1% title that's out there as well. That, if you're chilling at 4K or whatever, you've already got it. If you're at 3.9K, you probably already got it. But there are teams that are fighting for that, rank of all 26s or 27s, which I assume this makes it a decent bit harder. I mean, there are teams that I'm sure are pushing without a lock, and there's always that niche case where someone's insane on some class or whatever, and that's fine. I'm happy for them. But I feel like at this point in the season, for multiple reasons, it's not good timing. And I think they should personally just look at maybe waiting and reverting these until season 4, similar to what happened with Blood DK. There's not many benefits, and the negatives greatly outweigh it, personally.
So the question is whether you if something is super overpowered, which it definitely is, right?
Yeah, it needs to be nerfed for sure.
It's if that nerf comes late, is it better it coming late than ever? At this point, it's okay, this is what Warlock's been the whole season. Don't change it now. I wonder also. I think another conversation about this, just to kind of pass it around, is the discussion of nerfing a class's play numbers or the way it plays and the fun that it has. I think the example I used earlier was Prot Warrior, right? Prot Warrior played, we've talked about this before, Dorki and I on here, is it played so well and it was so fluid and everything just worked, and it reduced last stand with the bolster talent, and it was so broken defensively and offensively, but it was also insanely fun to play. It was really fast paced. It just felt great. But in the way they chose to nerf that, instead of nerfing the numbers or kind of moving things around, they just swapped a bunch of talents around in different trees and made the class just infinitely worse to play. I mean, I remember logging in on beta and being this is regardless of its power level, this is just so much worse to play than it was. I think where the Warlock situation, this tier becomes an issue with how they nerf it, is the thing that makes it broken is the tier, right? So how do you nerf the way you have to kind of nerf the tier element of it? Because a really dangerous thing that can happen is if you use my philosophy with the Prot Warrior thing and say, hey, okay, we want Warlocks, just do the numbers, not the way they play. Then that leaves that class in a very, very weird spot when they remove the borrowed power, because it got nerfed because of the borrowed power, and the borrowed power was removed, right?
Yeah, I mentioned this on stream half an hour ago. The exact same thing. I think it just comes down to not being tested as much on PTR as it should have been. I agree. I mean, they could nerf rain of fire damage. They could nerf shard gen from baseline abilities, but once that borrowed power is gone,
but no one's gonna test it. It was not good enough until the end, and who's actually on PTR testing stuff? Not honestly, random people don't just log on a PTR and play the shit out of it. Honestly, it's
well, damn, I was on a little bit.
Hey man, I was.
Yeah, you guys are. You guys who play WoW for a living. That's way different than the entire player base, right? Like, I'm saying,
Yeah.
like, you guys are going to do that, but, like, I remember THD and then, like, there wasn't, like, really a reason to play Destro or try Destro in, like, almost all of our testing. And
No, for sure.
exactly. So, like, you're not going to get numbers on this. Like, the Blizzard does pay attention to that. They don't pay attention to people sitting around and doing things on target dummies, honestly. So, like, it was not in and functional early enough for it to actually be tested. That was probably another primary issue.
I think so, yeah. Like, I ran a key towards the very end of PTR, and I sat there and I was like, oh, this is something. And I just never ran anymore. Knew it was crazy going live, and that was sort of it. Just left it alone. Didn't want to test it again. So, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I played a crap ton of PTR keys, and I knew right away Survival and Destro was going to be broken. Frost Mage was going to be broken too, but that class got gutted. And there was also like a bunch of clips on it too. I just don't know how it would receive the feedback.
I mean, I just don't feel like they balance around keys. Like, I don't know. I hate to be pessimistic about this.
Let me give a hot take real quick.
Not usually, but this absolutely is around keys.
I still don't think this change was targeted towards M+.
I
Really?
disagree. I completely disagree.
Yeah.
I want to hear it.
I think what they did is they looked at Warcraft logs, they looked at 100 percentile, 99, 95, and even 90, and they see that Destro was just like vastly ahead. Like obviously it's because of a lot of cheesing and all that, PI, etc. But I've noticed that like every time there's been tuning, they've looked at this specifically because like here's what I would think. If they targeted M+, they would have nerfed Survival too. They wouldn't have bothered buffing Aflock specifically because if you look, Aflock is like on the very bottom. Survival is just like, you know, sort of up there, but not exactly. And then Destro is just vastly ahead.
I think the reason why... Okay, so your logic for why you don't think it's about that is... or why you don't think it's about Mythic Plus because they didn't also touch the other class that's like clearly way too high is because I think they're leaving Survival like that because Survival's been a laughingstock and complete dog shit since it was invented. And I'm pretty sure the guy who made Survival Hunter is still there, and that class has never seen any play. I would not put it past that.
I hard disagree with this take.
I think there's a chance they're leaving Survival like this because that class has never been worth anything, and Warlocks are constantly insane. Not in Mythic Plus, but I don't think devs really take a huge look at like, oh, well, it's in this content where it's good and not this one, so let's leave it in this content. They look at it in a very broad PvE sense of... like, has a class been good? Warlocks are constantly insane. Survival Hunter has never been insane once. It's also very tinfoil
but that's still a very
obviously.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like I don't think
you said it was towards keys. You said it was towards keys. Warlock has been complete dog water.
Warlock has
literally
never been
for the
good
entire expansion. It was people used it in for like one MDI halls route. Warlock was literally complete dog water for all of BFA and all of Shadowlands.
In dungeons, in raids, it was incredible the entire time.
Yeah, in Mythic Plus, yeah.
In raids,
right. So, and we're saying they don't
10
balance
years.
around Mythic Plus, and then you're saying, well, Warlock's always. You know.
I think that they don't balance around Mythic Plus almost ever when they make any change. I think this change for Warlock was heavily. It
is, but
Mythic Plus.
I just feel like these change. Like, okay, this is the best example, and maybe Kalamazi can like give the actual Warlock explanation to this, but in the beginning of the season, they nerfed quote-unquote Destro, right? They made this weird change where essentially like they capped the shard gen that you would get on, they made it 8 targets, but the problem was on 8 targets you still have infinite rain of fire, so it was a change that literally did nothing. Like whoever made this change, and I might be wrong about this, but it was a change that literally did nothing. Like, they did not have enough understanding of how the class worked in Mythic Plus to even make a change that did... And I'm not saying, like...
this happens all the time, by the way.
Yeah, and I'm not saying, like, oh, this was a change that was, like, only minus 1% or whatever. This was a change that did literally nothing.
And then they nerfed it again later that day to actually do something.
Right.
Correct, yeah.
Exactly. And it's like, well, I just feel like... So the whole idea about, like, oh, they need to make more regular tuning, it's like, well... I just don't think they have the people with the understanding and the talent and the time to, like, the love and care of classes to do that.
No, 100%. And the way that Mythic Plus has been tuned in the past, I would argue that, like, every Mythic Plus meta that's ever happened was by accident because they tuned the rest of the classes specifically for raid, never considered Mythic Plus, and then whatever the Mythic Plus meta is just, like, whatever happened to be. And then they just don't touch it for a whole season. This has happened so many times where it's triple hunter, triple windwalker, triple rogue, like, you know, those rare seasons. But even where it's just like this is a pretty iconic season where it's just like there are 3 classes and there is not a strong argument to replace any of those 3 with something else until now. And That's like how most Mythic Plus seasons work out, whether it's 3 of one class or 3 individual classes. And I don't think that ever gets that way because Blizzard's like, these classes need to do like more AoE. It's just like the byproduct of weird raid nerfs.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the,
like, I feel
the
like
disparity
they-
between them is wild
Sorry,
right
go
now.
ahead.
No, it's, the disparity between the top few classes, like 2 and 3, and the other ones is pretty wild right now. I don't think we've seen this much disparity in a long time. At least I don't think so.
Are you talking about Firm Plus or for Raid?
Well, honestly, both I think at this point, but probably more plus. I feel like.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, because like I'm looking at the logs and it's like so clear of an indicator that like Destro is just vastly beyond anything else in like almost any category. But yeah, I mean it still feels to me that it's targeted towards Raid.
I think-
I don't actually know.
I
but
think
that's just my
Nagura
speculation.
is a genius, and I actually never had this take or heard anyone make this take ever until she did it. I'm sure someone thought of it, and this would help in Raid and Mythic Plus, but just very simply balancing every class the same way you do right now for single target, but balancing your 5 target plus AoE to be balanced to be exactly the same would help the game so much in viability in Mythic Plus. Because like people are always going to have their like 2 to 3 target niches where they're really powerful, where it like outscales other classes, but there's no reason why 5 plus should be niche. It's too common, both in Raid and then obviously it's almost entirely Mythic Plus. And that would like, I think alone if they did that, it would remove, like, you guys think, and this is true because there's always been so many powerful Mythic Plus classes, I really think that if that was true, you would see so much more variability in comps and people being way less meta-centric, because I think classes would be most of the time within like 5 to 6% of each other in like an overall keys damage, and that is not a lot of, that's not a big number.
My only
I mean,
issue with
I
that
agree.
is, yeah, doesn't it homogenize a little bit too much if you're making
I don't think so.
all the class try to do around the same-ish single
okay,
target
so-
and same-ish 5 plus?
Yes, it. Okay, well, the same single target doesn't matter because the way they do their single target is totally different. The way a Shadow Priest does single target feels completely different than the way an Assassination Rogue does single target, even if their numbers are the same. It doesn't homogenize because the way you play it is totally different. However, in mass AoE, yes, I do think it would homogenize it, but also, like, imagine thinking it's not already homogenized. Like spamming swipe and spamming Reign of Chaos and spamming spinning crane kick and all that shit, it already is. You just spam your AoE button. There's like a couple classes that have like a bit, like Frosty is a good example where it's like a bit more interesting. You're like keeping up breath and doing all this shit, but like that's already good, right? So it's not something that would need to be buffed. Like I just
Oh, I meant more along like also like cooldowns too. Like let's say like every class has a 2-minute cooldown instead of
you don't have to change cooldowns
some
at
classes
all.
having.
Yeah.
I
But then
mean,
wouldn't you
cooldowns,
have classes? Yeah, I
cooldowns
think that's
is
a big
always
part
what
of
makes
it,
a
though.
class like really, really good, right? Like when you look at like Windwalker cooldowns in last seasons, or like BFA Fire Mage, like Combust, and like the Mastery synergy and all that stuff. Like I'm pretty sure the way cooldowns synergize with all
BFA Fire
your
Mage
kit.
was definitely an extreme anomaly, but yeah.
Well, right, but that was all. The damage was literally completely revolving around their cooldowns, right?
Yeah.
Sort of like how Frosty K right now. the
Here's
2
what I'm
minutes.
saying. You don't have to change the way any class plays because almost any time you make a nerf because of that, it's a bad thing, and it has been historically for a while now. Just is there like 5 targets or is it 4 targets in the Zandalari troll, like the Zuldazar?
That's
I think
4.
it's 4.
It's 4. Okay, put a little quick little turn up down next to there and make it 5, and then just if you're a Blizzard tester, just play the game correctly in AoE on those 5 targets for 5 minutes and make every class very similar, and the game will be a lot better.
I mean, that
that's all it
sounds
is.
cool, but how do you work in target caps at that point too? Because like some things are capped and some things aren't, and that's a
Uncap
whole other
everything,
can of worms.
obviously.
I'm down for that. That sounds great.
Yeah,
But,
uncapping
like,
everything. Yeah, capping shit was always weird. It was them trying to change something for the total wrong reason, and that's again,
Yeah.
it's a theme. They do that a lot.
Fair. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think it'd be pretty legit. You might, I mean, obviously we mentioned some classes have more utility than others in Plus. Like I mean, Rogue versus Warlock. I feel like Warlock utility DRs a lot in Plus, even in rating too, unless there's a fight where you need like multiple gates. But having like everybody being within a few percent of each other would be pretty legit. It might lead to some varying comps in Plus a bit. I'd be down. Yeah, sure. I feel like it's pretty rare where you see a season like where you have a class that's brought just based on its damage. I think Destro's sort of there. I mean, we have utility, like we DLR past 1. I think like the last time was probably like Demo loss, like in mid BFA, like with explosive potential. Like the damage was just so wild. We had very little utility, but the damage was just so wild. I don't know. I support it. Sounds like fun to me.
Do you guys think a new key will be timed this season if this nerf goes through?
No, no shot.
I think.
Well,
Sorry, go ahead.
okay, well, only because of two reasons. One is because it's very late in the season. If it was like early in the season, then of course it would be 100% true. But we're pretty late into season, and MDI is happening, so like a lot of the top teams are just not playing right now. Also, there's no more like major push weeks.
Yeah, a lot of people were asking when I was streaming last night, like, "Oh, what are you guys gonna start bringing instead of a Warlock?" And it's like, dude, look, like, there's only a couple weeks left. Like, Echo's not even gonna be playing anymore. Like, why we have to find a new player and like redo all these routes, or not really redo, but at least like show them all this stuff and like figure out how do we do this skip without a Warlock gate? And it's just like, dude, nah. Like, I'm pretty sure Is it possible to time some higher keys? Probably, but I think none of the top teams will be playing enough to like us personally. I can't imagine we're going to be trying to beat any of our times after this week.
So I mean, I think I sort of took most of the question that Max asked a bit ago, but I mean, do you guys think they should like revert these changes? Or how do you guys feel about it?
I was on the fence because I've always been usually a believer of like better late than never. Like, everyone always asks like, oh, was this the right time? It's like, well, obviously the right time was the first week of the season, like, but that time has passed and we can't make them do that now. I don't know. I feel like I probably would have liked to see like not that happen, just because like it's just so late into the season. Like, it is just so late into the season to make a change like this. I feel like if it was even just like halfway through the season, I'd probably say it's a good thing. But like, people literally can't even you can't even gear up a character now and like to the point where your Warlock was, or like introduce a new player to your team. And it's not like, I don't think they've necessarily made the lives of anyone else better. Like, it's not like, oh, nice, like all the feral druids are being like, oh yeah, like we're gonna get into keys now because Warlock's nerfed. Like, people are just gonna invite rogues again or mages again, or whatever the number 4 class.
I think Warlock might also still not be bad.
Yeah, or just still Warlock, right? Because
I think we're still good. Yeah.
Yeah, it's still gonna be Destro.
But I think like it's not gonna be like overwhelmingly 2 Destro locks and half these keys on Spiteful weeks or whatever. It'll still be a good damage profile, but like you're losing a lot based on routes that have been barely beaten and timed and made around Warlock CDs. So,
I do want to make one thing though, and I know like this is why I really wanted to invite Robin on this today, but he like practiced all day and wanted to sleep. But I know he was complaining that it fucks their practice. I do want to point out that it's like basically the same argument for like Race World First stuff. They make like Race World First changes for the Race World First, and they're almost always wrong. I would make the argument that making a change specifically because the MDI would also be the same, and I don't think they should consider like the MDI really in changes they make, because I would bet that most of the time it would also lead to a wrong decision because they just don't understand really like how they work. Because like yeah, Now's complaining about it, but honestly, like those dudes are like, the people doing the MDI are sick, and like the best team is still gonna win, and they're going to like have to improvise and find a new way around it. And honestly, like that's part of the fun of like things changing, is like you have to be like, it's another competitive thing where you can just outthink someone else. And like, yeah, it fucks some of their practice, and yeah, they have like clout and they have like big streams and stuff, so like fans are gonna read their tweets and be like, yeah, you're right, fuck, what the fuck, the MDI. But like, I really don't think it should ever factor into Blizzard's decision making how it's going to affect the MDI, and then also for the exact same argument, the Race World First.
Well, I mean, so there's two problems here, right? Number one, people talk about, oh, when should they do the patch based off of the MDI? Like, this is just a complete failure on Blizzard's part. The fact that if they want to roll out a balance change during a practice week, that they somehow like, well, sorry guys, we just have to put it halfway through your practice week and there's absolutely nothing we can do about it. Like, that's a load of horse shit. Like, how is MDI been going on for 5 or 6 years or whatever, and that's still a thing? Like, that's really the problem, right? It has nothing to do with, like, should they make the change or shouldn't they? But on top of that, it's like, I've been seeing this take everywhere that they're making it for MDI, and I guess I don't really understand, like...
No, that takes wrong.
I agree it's wrong, but, like, I'm interested to hear, like, because I'm sure there's a bunch of guys in the Twitch chat that think that, and it's like, well... Like, Warlock doing a zillion damage is cool for MDI. Like, that's what people want to see in the MDI, is like, oh, really big pulls and like really big numbers, And they limit it, so it's not like there's gonna be 3 Warlocks on every team. So like, in what way, like what thought process or what way would there, like, how could this change even possibly be related to MDI? That's what I don't understand.
I mean, I agree. This change should have happened a couple months ago when they made the change, like they reduced shard gen from. I mean, it revolves around shard generation. That's what they're concerned about. They even mentioned it in the blue post when they, a few days ago. Like their main concern is Destro shard gen. The nerf on April 18th, I pulled it up, was they made Rain of Fire have a reduced chance to generate shards past 5 targets with the Inferno talent. But obviously, like 5 targets was still basically like nearly infinite shard gen. You might have to throw a random conflict rate in every once in a while. Like their concern is shard gen because it fuels everything else. I don't know. I don't think it's based around MDI either. I just think that it is a bit too late. And I don't know season 4 stuff. I would assume we have like a month to 2 months max left of this season. I think at this point you just say, it is what it is. We made a mistake, and
1 month. Yeah.
That's just that. So.
Dude, also I want to point out something that Growl said. He said that like, what do people really want to see in like in the MDI? It's like big pulls. I want to amend that statement. What people really want to see in the MDI viewer, what they want to see
their own class.
Is someone bring their own class. They they want to see the people who are doing these fast keys to play their class. That is actually the only thing they want. It's very like that's it. But, like that's the only reason the rules are the way they are now, because like there's like a triple hunter meta season and they were doing huge pulls and doing good damage. They didn't give a fuck about that. People that like Johnny, who plays a paladin in chat, he's like, where's Rat? Where is Rat? They have to change this. That's the only reason they did that.
Do you think they could make a format for MDI that tries like somehow makes you bring a bunch of different specs that isn't miserable for competitors?
I've thought about it before, but it's always gonna be miserable for competitors. And then like a very very not knowledgeable like Twitch fan be like, well, it would mean they would have to multi-class and it'd be cool. And you could do like picks and bans of specs, and like you could but this is
no, I was thinking like,
this is
what if it was
player.
more like, okay, it's like along with the affixes are the classes. Like it's literally just like, okay, this map is Plaguefall and you have to bring these 3 specs.
I think that is just ridiculous for the competitors. Like, how are people going to get into competing if they don't play every single class in the game?
I don't think the
like,
MDI can be saved.
The barrier to entry would be
It's
I mean,
literally
fair enough.
It's a fundamentally
That's like a Growl
It's the
viewer
MDI.
take right there.
Yeah, it is
I didn't say it was a good take. I just said
Well, yeah, I'm just saying it's a. It's what
you just said it
viewers
was a
love to
take from one of my viewers. I'm not even streaming.
It's true, but dude, your viewers love to see. Oh, can you please play Mistweaver? Can you please play with non-meta specs?
Dude, they should literally just delete the MDI and just only do more great pushes. It's such a better product. The
Agreed.
MDI, they've tried so much stuff with the MDI, and it's just fundamentally not a good esport. Like, it's too long. It's repetitive. It's just not good. They've tried. They gave it a shot. The great push is actually gold. It's so good.
I enjoy watching MDI, but TGP definitely is something that is a bit more enticing than things. I enjoy watching it more than MDI for sure. I don't know. I don't think MDI should go completely, but shit, man. I mean, I feel like it's not even just me. I feel like even when I talk about it in chat, like the majority of viewers prefer the Great Push a good bit more. Just more exciting to watch. I feel like the MDI has become a little stale. Maybe the TGP would be as well if it was played as much, or but I don't know. I sort of agree.
Yeah, no, I think when they made the format change with TGP, where they made it like they made it so there's only 4 dungeons on day 1, and then they added just to kind of like keep things like you could follow the pace of it, because it was a little confusing at first when like one team would try and go for a really super high key in one dungeon and other ones would be like more spread out. It was like hard to keep score. But now that they like sort of spread it out, and I think they should maybe spread it out a little bit more. I do.
It's
really
hard
like
goated. The Great Push, I think, is. I think it's like among the best like WoW PvE content they could have possibly created. It's fucking perfect. It's so good. Even as someone who like I don't like, even before I started doing Mythic Plus recently, I had not done Mythic Plus in years. I'd competed in MDIs, but I don't watch them because I think it's super boring. I was like on the edge of my seat the entire time. I also think the first one also popped off too, because like there was a bunch of like random drama around it, and like what sells?
Yeah.
Do you know what sells like pretty much anything like in any popular sport is just people really have to care about the narrative and the players behind it. And I think there's just enough players in the Great Push that people care about and watch their streams. Yeah, I was a part. Dude, I think I deserve some small credit for the first Great Push being lit because of some like shit that made people mad.
No, you did, because I made a video on it. I remember that. So actually, that was a huge meme in our group or whatever, because you used
You guys
the phrase,
named your
yeah.
your team the
Oh,
candle
The candle holder, yeah.
the candle
Yeah.
holders.
Yeah, that
You
was one of
said,
the where
yeah.
James was talking shit, right? In Twitter.
Yeah.
I love that. That was great.
Yeah, dude, that was like the greatest like come from nothing story. Like JPC just started playing this game in beta, comes up, has like a, you know, perceived like big ego, and then like everyone like is kind of like in the rating scenes like kind of whatever about him, and like by the end of the great push he was like very well liked, and then just got recruited to Liquid. It was like out of nowhere.
He's a
Anyways,
real one.
do you guys have any other takes about the stuff? It can be Dragonflight related.
Could be. We get it.
Warlock stuff. Should
Alright,
hunters
I got some
also
copium.
be nerfed? I think
I got
hunters
some
are like
copium.
just as good as locks, except they're not as tanky. But like I feel like it's like, okay, so I don't know if you guys have paid attention to this, but in raid, classes have absolutely been getting nerfed this entire expansion because of PI. Like almost one class per patch has been nerfed too hard, and it's because they look at like Warcraft log statistics, and that class is getting PI'd, and yes, it is the best class, but it seems like it's way better than it is, so it gets a bigger nerf. I wonder if that's the case here. I wonder if like just by a flip of a coin, if Survival Hunter had been slightly better for PI than Destro, if today we are seeing Survival Hunter nerfed instead of Destro, if they had been getting PI instead.
What was the last class that got nerfed because of PI as well?
Unholy DK.
Venthyr Moonkin got nerfed because of PI.
Well, Demo got nerfed about 2 months ago because of PI.
Oh,
and
Demo
Decon.
too. Yeah. That was a good
Yeah,
one.
yeah, dude. Like, don't get me started on
MM Hunter
externals,
Wild
man.
Spirits in Castle Nath 3 as well.
That's it. Yeah, that too. I'm a huge fan of getting rid of these like externals and stuff. I don't like PI. I don't like Kyrian Link. I don't like.
Ooh, this is a spicy
Fairies,
topic.
okay. I mean, I think they're really good when it comes to progression, because being able to allocate like power infusions and fairies and Kyrian links at points in a fight where you want to allocate damage to things where you can't meet a check or whatever is really good. That's fun.
I think they're all good. It's just that Shadow Priest PI should be self-cast and not even an option to move it around, and and the PI that Healer Priest can move around is just not as good. Like, you don't see anyone out here like fucking rioting with pitchforks about Night Fairies for like CDR reduction on classes. You don't see people getting mad about like the small S. Doesn't like Arcane still have like some kind of like thing it gives to someone? It was the same one it had in Kata. What am I thinking of?
Oh, it's like amplify magic or something.
Yeah, so like no one cares about that shit. It's just because PI is too good. Like 25% haste is fucking crazy. Like, it should be like 25% haste for the priest, and then if they give it out, it's just like, you know, it's either like the legendary and they get it as well, but like the version that they give out isn't fucking 25%. And my only real argument for it not being that good, because like the main people who hate it honestly are parsing people and retail, and honestly, who fucking cares? But as far as it actually being like, I think it's an actual problem that throughout an expansion, multiple classes have been nerfed, and the only reason they got nerfed is because PI exists, and they happen to be the best class to get PI that patch. That is fucking dog shit. Like, that can't be in the game because Blizzard isn't smart enough to see that and do things around it.
I think all these external buffs are fundamentally really good. The problem is damage meters and logs, and like you said, parsing. That's what
No
really
one fucking
ruins
cares,
it.
man.
Yeah. Well, I mean, people do care.
No
though.
way.
Like, even though you say that, yeah,
Raiders
people
care.
100% care. Yeah.
All right, I'm
Raiders
telling you,
care
as a
lot.
priest, I have people. Now, granted, it's the same couple monkeys most weeks, but I literally have people like, "Yo, dog, can I get PI? Yo, I'm trying to go for rank 1 on Skolex.
People are
Yo, hit me up.
I mean,
2
it's
minutes.
not
That's
that,
when I need
too.
Faye
It's also-
here." Like, dude, I'm
Look,
telling you,
real-
people do that. People who are my raid leader will literally assign me PI, and he'll be like, "Dude, just put it on me. Just pretend like just he won't notice." Like, just, you know, just
No,
just throw
it's
it on
only
me,
Chat,
man.
really-
there has been so much stupid drama in my guild because of PI. Have you guys had the same drama?
Yeah, see, and you're in liquid.
Every time.
100%.
Have you-
100%.
listen,
Yeah, 100%.
You're
Okay,
in liquid,
yeah,
and there's
yes,
see?
yes, I'm sure that's true. What I'm saying is, have you guys heard that same kind of shit because of Night Fae Fairy CDR as PI?
Like fighting over, like equal comparisons between the two.
Yeah. Have you heard
It's
people
better with
complain
rank
about it and ask for
No.
it? Yes. Is it causing drama? There's not had
No.
one drama ever in any WoW guild because of Night Fae Fairies, because they're not nearly as fucking powerful as PI. It's one of the best cooldowns in the game, and you can just give it to people. It's just too good. It's too. It's and Blizzard.
Well, it's also
isn't-
only some classes abuse.
Yeah, it
fairies,
depends
or
on the
like fire
class and it depends
mages.
on the fight.
Yeah.
You know,
I think it
like
depends
some
on-
classes, like for instance, like a Moonkin or whatever, like you can't really do that, right? Or like some, you know, like I think the only reason is because like giving somebody haste like almost unanimously like helps them, even if it's like different amounts. But with fairies, like, or like let's say you have to hold your cooldowns, like you're assigned to like, oh, this ad group comes up at 3 minutes, so you have to, you know what I mean? Like some people can't even use their cooldowns early if you fey them. I think if Fate was like good for everybody equally, I mean, I agree with you that PI is like I'm basically echoing what you're saying is that PI is like more often good and better than fairies, but at the same time, like
PI is fucking broken. A 20%, 25% haste buff, or a 20-second, 25% haste buff is like better than most cooldowns in the game.
Yeah,
It's
especially in a
just too
world where
good.
like damage profiles are all stacked around CDs. There's no like big, there's like no classes that are like consistent damage anymore. It's just like insane damage every 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and then back down to like a mediocre amount. If you can stack that with a power infusion, it just grows exponentially, right? Like wanted to buy a return to like just static, like just consistent damage profiles with minor spikes during CDs. It's just too excessive, you know.
I think.
I mean, I think that's
I think if
fucking
you were to
sick.
poll the WoW community on whether external DPS buffs like PI and everything like it were in the game, if it should be removed, I think you'd have more than half of the community say that it should be. So I think
because
that would be-
everyone plays DPS.
Well, sure. I mean, yeah. I mean, just look at like basically the breakdown of how many people play each role in this game can be seen by what a raid comp is. A like generic raid comp is 2 tanks, 4 healers, and 14 DPS, and that is about like the ratio of like how many people play DPS in this game. Versus
yeah, I mean that's what Dorki tells me is he's like, well, you have to understand, Growl, that you're a healer, so the people just don't care.
Quite
about
literally,
the game being
70%
around
of
you.
the game is DPS, and
Right.
so yeah, it's
Yeah.
always going to be that way. But I mean, yeah, but even then though, Growl, like you're saying it from a healer perspective, because I understand your perspective. It's like I like that it's like basically if you're a healer, you're a support. Supports in like MOBAs and stuff weren't really a thing when like WoW came out, or they weren't as a popular of a thing. Now, like in 2022, people are very well aware of like what the term support is, and that's exactly what a healer is in WoW. So like the whole idea of like giving away one of your cooldowns to someone else is exactly what you would do as a support if you had the opportunity to in any MOBA or any game where there's a support. That's like the whole fucking point. You would give a
Right.
DPS buff. Wasn't there like an Overwatch character that would just like buff another player and stuff like that?
I was a
That's-
Mercy main,
Yeah, like
dude.
that's a very common support thing. That's why Blizzard has it in the game for sure, is because of that, and that's why healers don't generally mind that, and why you are making the argument that it's good, because it is like a cool thing that certain healers bring versus other healers. Like would Priest be the Mythic Plus heal right now if it didn't have PI? Maybe not. You don't know, right? Like, so it's just like something a certain class can bring. It's just that there's not enough, like, it's kind of the thing with raid buffs, right? Like, why raid buffs are a problem is like half of the classes have them, and like half don't, and they're actually adding some in the new expansion. And that's where it's weird. It'd be so much better if there were 0 or like everyone had one. But like the fact that it's like half is weird. And it's kind of the same thing with PI. It's like, it's not like there's like these cool things that healers can do as support to like help people in their group. It's like there's literally one healer that does that, and it has fairies and PI. So like that whole like line of thinking doesn't really work, and it's too strong.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree it could be expanded on. Like, I think it might have been Dorky or somebody brought up the idea of like, what if every single healer had like a 2-minute strong buff, and then you could even go as far to like give some sort of like a forbearance or like a sated sort of thing. So like every healer has a buff, and then also you can't really like stack a bunch of buffs on one guy, and like that might sort of fix the whole like parsing thing too. Because it's like, well, you either are getting a buff every 2 minutes or you're not, but you're not getting like 7 PIs or whatever.
The only way I can see this really being fixed is if they can count the damage that the healer or whatever support is providing and add it on to whoever is providing that damage. Because like right now, the issue still stands. If every single healer had an external, like, well, I mean, the DPS is gonna feel awful. Because like think about the amount of times, like it's especially true when you have 2 of the same DPS. Like if you have 2 boomkins in your raid and one of them's getting PI, everyone's gonna be fucking pissed. Because like that guy's just gonna be looking at the meters the entire time and he's just seeing himself doing 10% less damage. even if he's playing better than this idiot other boomkin, because that other boomkin happens to be an officer who's getting all the PIs. Like, I feel like the only way you can really solve this is if you can somehow
I think you're 100%
make
right.
the damage counts.
The thing is that PI is like the one that's on everyone's mind because they're not like conditioned to think about like what other ones could look like that they could design them. But let's just say PI instead just like adds a 1500 shadow hit to every ability you do for 20 seconds instead. That could absolutely be attributed to the priest, and it could in most cases be just as good too. So like if you were to add more supportive abilities, because I think healers do like doing that shit. So it's like you could add more supportive abilities to other healers and have, I mean, yeah, 100%. If that whatever damage you're giving to a DPS showed up on a healer's thing, that would completely remove any of the people actually arguing about it and caring about it. And it's the only reason that people care at all is because it adds their damage meter. But like the PI currently could never be done. Because, like, how the fuck would the game be able to tell how much more damage you're doing, particularly because you have 25% extra haste, right? But, yeah, I actually think that is a really good idea. Because I would be hard down for healers that, like Paladins just have the Night Fae ability, like, next patch. But it just...
Yeah, and Kyrian Boomkin.
Exactly. But it just shows for the person doing it. I think that's perfectly
Kyrian Boomkin.
Yeah.
Dude, people hate Kyrian Boomkin.
Dude, you know what's mad funny, by the way? So before they nerfed Kyrian Boomkin in PTR, I would be playing a shitload of Kyrian Boomkin. I would like there's a trick you can do to make it appear on your meters, and it's kind of cringe. Like you would have to get in combat before the key starts, link your buddy, and then start the key. That was like a hack that I did specifically, so I can look better on the meters as a Kyrian Boomkin. Yeah, that was a details hack. I figured nobody knew. Like everyone's like, how the hell is this Kyrian Boomkin doing so much damage? I'm like, yup, I know the secret. These guys don't. Because like everyone else who was trying Kyrian Boomkin, they would just link the target normally, and half of the damage would be on the player, and half of the damage would be on themselves. But I would have all the damage to myself.
That's so
that
good.
fucking node.
I bet people in chat were losing it. So about balance in this game in general, I was mentioning this earlier about like how this game needs, with how complicated this game is, it just needs more frequent times for devs sitting, because I actually don't know how often this happens. How often does a dev sit down and be like, all right, where does my class or spec or three, actually I think how it works is like they work on like, each dev works on like 3 classes, and they like kind of like mix around and work with different people and stuff. How often do you think they sit down and like, all right, where does this spec stack up against other specs in all of these different types of combat types in the game? Or do they just like have a monthly meeting and just like type in Warcraft logs and just like move some shit around? Like that's what I feel like they do, and I really think that they should. I think it's so important, and they're gonna probably be forced to do this because of how like involved a lot of the spec trees are at the beginning of the expansion. But I really would just hope that Blizzard once a week or once every other week posted changes, or at least talked about class balance way more frequently than they do now, because this is like one of the hardest games to balance that exists, and I don't think it's a bad thing. Like an example of how you'd fix it is like the Final Fantasy homogenization. But like if you guys knew how that game worked, if WoW was like that, it would make the game 100 times worse. It would make the game way easier to balance 100%, but like the game would be 10 times, WoW specifically would be 10 times worse if you just made everyone the same cooldown.
Well, because Final Fantasy is just only single target boss fights, right? Or like 99% single
99%,
target,
but also because the classes all have a very similar defensive capability. They all, they all like do the same shit basically. Like they play differently, but they like what they're able to do is, yeah, I mean, also, yeah. The main reason why that game's super balanced, like I think WoW would be insanely easy to balance is if you didn't have to worry about 1 target, 2 target, 3 target Mythic Plus style pulls. Like it was just only bosses. Like that would be a joke, right?
The way I would really like M plus balance specifically is if they kept specific niches for classes. Like, outlaw rogues, fuck it, just keep them capped at 5. I know outlaws are not gonna be happy about it, but what if they made it so that on the 5 targets they actually fucking crush 5 targets? Like, they're not going to get beat by Destros. They're not going to get beat on single... Or, I mean, they'll probably get beat by single target. But, like, just keep them at 5 targets, but make them really good at 5 targets. And, like, Destro, keep them doing insane AoE, but, make them worse everywhere else. Just let them have that super mass AoE. And, like, sub-rogues, just let them have...
how the game is now,
target.
except for Destro in the example you gave is also just going to crank outlaw on 5 targets.
Well, yeah, it's the outliers, right?
Exactly.
There's always those.
Yeah, that's the
But
problem.
like the thing is like that is what this game is already. Like there are classes that like don't do great and then have existed in the past where they don't do great single target, and they don't do great AoE, but on like 2 target, they just beat every class in the game by a mile. But like the thing is that doesn't happen often enough, and then people just swap off that class if it's not the main thing that happens in Mythic Plus, or like they're insane for one raid fight a tier, but people are stupid enough to just look at overall like sepulcher statistics and look at every boss, and it's like, oh man, I'm low, buff me, even though like you are insane at one thing. Like that definitely happens.
That's just that raid thing, right? Is the problem is like when you look at raid, you think like, oh, what is a 2, like how does a class's 2 target do, or 3 target or whatever, right? But in Mythic Plus, like you almost never care about that except for maybe like one part of one dungeon, right? Like I think what Dorki's saying is like, you don't really care too much about 2 target and 3 target and 4 target. Like mainly it's about like single target, like 5 target, like big AoE, and then it's about like bursty or sustained damage, like funnel or not funnel, like you know what I mean? Like they have to keep those niches like that are very specific to Mythic Plus, but there's almost always like some sort of class that just like does things better than others. But I mean, I feel like you're right though that a lot of WoW does have that sometimes. Like a lot of times there is classes that have those certain niches. Like I think for one example is like Rogue and BFA was like, and not at the end of BFA, sorry, like eventually when Fire Mage became OP, like Rogue literally was like a freaking rogue. Like it would run around and go invisible and like do stealth shit, like start RPs. Like it had a lot of stuns and like mob control and stuff. Like you didn't bring a rogue for the damage, but I mean it still did okay damage. The question is just like, do people want to play that way? I don't know. Like everyone just wants to be the Omega uncapped class, and then usually as you go further into the expansion, people just pull bigger and bigger, so you just want a class that does big AoE like Warlock.
Okay, are you looking at my stream right now?
I can, yeah.
Hold up, just mute it, but then open it and look at this shitty paint drawing I just drew. The issue with like niches in this game is that like that thing on the right, it looks like it says 5+, which is actually gonna be very confusing. It actually says single target. That's ST. Just don't worry about that. I'm actually hold up. I'm just gonna redraw that.
5+.
Yeah, it looks like a 5+ for sure. That's okay. So we're gonna draw a very clean S right here. That's an S for sure. So like we got single target, right? So like if this is like a pie chart of how often damage things happen in this game, like if you combine Mythic Plus and rating, it's like this. It's like single target. It's actually probably even more AoE, by the way. It looks like S+. Okay, you know what? I'm just gonna make it a capital T, so there's no confusion in these parts. All right. But then like all these little pie slices over here, this is like 2 target. This is funnel. This is exactly 4 target cleave instead of like more than that, and AoE is just anything 5 and higher. So like the only issue with that is because AoE and single target are so prevalent in this game that it can't be considered the same. Like if a class is like insane at funnel, this is like probably sub rogue actually. Like sub rogue way back in the day, old year, it was actually I think right when you guys started playing, or right when Growl started playing. Like they were so broken on funnel, and there was literally one raid fight Zool where funnel was broken as fuck, and then they and then they nerfed that spec all the way until this patch. Like sub wasn't used, and they just like removed a fundamental part of their thing because of funnel, when in reality funnel is just this little pie slice, and like the most of the game is these 2 things. So like I feel like it would also just be understanding that, and that's why I think all of these niches should still exist. But single target, obviously, try to balance it as well as you can. And then AoE should also be tried to balance as well as you can. Like, I promise you, what they should do is go to Warcraft log statistics and look at any, like, you know, any statistic of, like, single target. I just really feel like mass AoE in this game is too common to be some niche thing that some classes are good and bad at. I just think it should, like, if you go to Skull-X, like, something like purely single target, you know, like this is like, all things considered, this is like really good. MM's a little too low, but this is fine. In a game like this is acceptable balance, by the way. This is perfect. Everything from Frost DK and up, acceptable balance.
Look how bad Destro is too. Why are they nerfing us? Look how bad we are. I don't...
Okay, but okay, hold up. You get the point, right? I think mass AoE should look something like this. Anything over 5 targets should look something like this. I just think it's too important and too common in the game to be one of these niche things where, like, classes, if you look at a complete niche, like Lords of Dread, right? Like 2 target, there's going to be massive differences between classes, right? Like, this is niche, though. It's okay. This has existed like this forever. But I just think AoE is too common. That's my whole bit.
Yeah, I guess I just feel like, so when you say, like, 5 targets versus 10 targets can be very different, though, right? Like you brought up the idea of
No, I think they should be the
let's just
same.
do-
What do they? Are they
Well,
really? How many classes in the game change what they do when they're hitting 5 targets versus 10? So why should your damage be any less than someone else's? It makes no sense.
I mean, maybe it could be a design thing that's fixed out. I guess the way I see it is like, if you do like some classes with their cooldowns scale way better on like bigger pulls, and also like it depends on sort of the way stuff is pulled, right? Like, what if you have a huge pull and then another huge pull after that?
But
or,
isn't
like,
that the
a huge
problem
pull
where
and then a
like
break pull or whatever?
how many like bits of content outside of like literally Sired and Athreus and like Soul Render or Stone Legion Generals do you get a pure Mythic Plus profile in Raid? It's basically just for Mythic Plus, and then it's the same thing as mentioned before, right? Oh, when do tanks have to kite? Oh, if we didn't have to kite, you would just pull bigger and kite more. And it's the same thing with Mythic. Like in Mythic Plus, if you can, you are always going to try to fucking pull Gigantor, and then you're just gonna run into the problems where yes, if you make 10 target mass AoE and niche, you're gonna have exactly what happens now. Like you're gonna have Destrolocks, Survival Hunters, and Windwalkers just cranking everyone because it's like, oh, that's our niche. But then those same players are gonna complain if they're not like top on a single target boss. Like every single class community will complain unless they're literally #1 single target always. So
Yeah,
like,
I mean, it just
like
takes a lot of
unfixable
love
problem.
and care about it, right? Like, for instance, you know, okay, let's say you have a class that's hypothetically like really good on huge AoE pulls, but in order to do that, like they need to take talents that would majorly sacrifice their single target damage so that in raid, if they wanted to be on the same level of single target, they could do that, but then they wouldn't, you know, like they couldn't have both with that talent setup, you know? Like, it's possible, I just feel like with how many specs there are, it's just like, it feels so incredibly complicated, and the way things are now, I don't even think classes get as much love as they need, so I can't see them, like, doing... Like, basically what you're saying is just, like, do better with AoE balance, which, I mean, I agree with, but it's hard. Like, I don't see them doing that.
It's hard with varying damage profiles like you're talking about. I do wish there was more class balance. Like, I think bi-weekly would be great. That might be a bit excessive and too much to ask for, but, I mean, at least, like, once a month. Like,
It's
just
not
like
too
a...
much to ask for.
I mean, I don't think it
there's
is either,
no way
personally.
that's a lot.
But I don't think it is too much either. But I'm just saying, like, I don't want to like set the bar too high. But having like a every 2-3 weeks, even like once a month post that Blizz puts out saying this is what we're changing because of this, I'd look forward to that. It would shift the meta every month, every few weeks. I don't think it's too much to ask for. I mean, in 9.15,
is that a good thing? To shift the meta every month?
I mean, okay.
I don't think you
that's
shift the meta.
odd.
I don't think you shift the meta every month. That's
I don't mean like hardcore shift, but if balancing is needed. I don't know. I don't know. That's a topic in itself, I guess.
Yeah, like
right?
that's sort of the problem where I was like
How do you
wondering,
fix
like,
that,
okay,
right?
are these warlocks? Is this like, are warlocks getting nerfed this late bad? And I've just sort of come to terms with Mythic Plus that you either need to play the game as, okay, here's my spec, I like it, I have fun playing it, I don't care if it's good, like I'm just gonna either play or not play and that's it. Or you sort of have to decide like, okay, a month into the season, now that people are starting to get their gear, like, okay, this class shreds, like, I have to play this class now. Like, I feel like that's just how you have to play Mythic Plus, and if they do more frequent balance changes, I don't, like, how do you play Mythic Plus then, you know? Like, what happens when you're the guy that dedicates all their time to playing Warlock, and then, oh, Warlock 5% nerf, a couple weeks later, oh, Warlock 5% nerf, and now all of a sudden, you know, clicks and all the top Warlocks are now switching to something else, and now everyone hates Warlock because, you know, it took one too many nerfs. It's like, I agree with you in terms of viability. Like, yeah, you would still be fine, and if you were a good player, you would still shred in pugs, but I think reality, what people want to see is more equal representation and also like getting invited to stuff, and I just don't even know if that'll ever happen. You know, because like our groups are sitting here like looking what Echo are doing, and we're like, oh man, Echo's doing this, like, you know, we're not even gonna pretend like we're on that level where we can like innovate in the same way that they can. And then people are looking at our groups, and then people are looking at their groups, and then the plus 15s are looking at all the groups, and it's like, I feel like a lot of people think that better balance will fix the meta problem, but I think
there's always gonna be a meta. It's just gaming. There's always gonna be a meta.
Especially WoW.
Yeah, like I
the thing
saw
is
somewhere.
The meta is not important though, because like it's not about necessarily about having a meta. It's more about having viable choices that you can bring, and if they do small changes frequently, that should be able to achieve it. Like, yeah, sure, Fire Mage is not the best third choice right now, but I mean, hey, the #1 team in the world is playing. Well, actually not anymore, but the #1 team just before was playing Fire Mage.
Yeah, and people still who play Mage complain about Mage, and they say Mage is dead.
But that's fine though. You know, like I think that's
okay,
fine. I don't
but
think that's an
right,
issue.
I agree with you, and I think it's better for gameplay. But I actually don't think that will like make the average player happy. Like I think the average player, if they were presented with like two paths, one path was their class is mediocre, but for whatever reason they're always invited to every group they want to, or path B, they can do top damage in every group they get in, but no one wants to play with them. I feel like they would always take the first road.
Yeah.
I don't think that's necessarily true. I think there are a lot of mages who are pretty satisfied with being able to play how they are right now. Like, I'm pretty sure if you look at a lot of the mages on the leaderboard, they're like, sure, we could be windwalkers, but hey, at least I can play the game. It's not like I'm a feral druid.
Well, I was gonna say, yeah, give
Okay.
only because Mage has been so good for the whole expansion, but like give Mage another 2 seasons of not being meta, and then we'll see what they have to say. Like exactly, right? Like, well, it's not Feral Druid. Like Feral Druid still has that problem. Like, yeah, I mean, Mage is like maybe not the best example, but it's an example of a class that
Well, why can't they just
people
bring everything
literally
up
got.
to a mage level? Like, they can bring feral druids up to mage levels, and then feral druids can start playing on plus, and they won't feel that bad for being in a group with a Destro lock.
Because I think Blizzard cares about M plus the least compared to Raid and
Yeah,
PvP.
obviously, but we're just
And
talking
I-
about like assuming.
Well,
they
right.
did
Oh yeah.
balance
I mean, I
properly.
agree. Like I agree that if they did more frequent balance tuning and like, you know, gave it again like a lot of love and care to the point where they were bringing all these other classes up, and like, yeah, there's still obviously like the classes that Echo wants to bring, but you can still shred on any class. Like I do agree, probably can't go in keys and like own as a feral like in a 25 key. It's going to be really really hard or impossible. But I just don't. It just takes so much effort for them to do that I just don't see that ever happening.
I personally feel like it doesn't take that much effort. Like I don't know why everyone thinks it takes a lot of effort to do frequent tuning in this game. But like it's very easy to
Is there a
just look at.
AAA company with 5,000 employees and I've never seen them do it once?
I feel like it doesn't either, but I feel like looking at, I'm not trying to bash Blizz here because I enjoy the game, but I feel like looking at how things have gone over the course of Shadowlands, even previous expansions when tuning has been needed and it hasn't happened. I mean, look at 9.15. They were like, yeah, we're going to address dead talents. Nothing happened. Like, nothing happened. Like, nothing happened at all. I think that's where a lot of, like, the doubt and the concern sort of lies, where if you're asking for bi-weekly tuning. I think the gap between, like, the bad classes and the good ones definitely needs to be less. The disparity is wild out there.
I think the issue, okay, so like the difference between the bad and the good is like an insane thing. Like I think the middle of the pack has always been like pretty competitive. Like I don't know if you see this like dog shit drawing. I drew my thing right now, but the reason you guys ever see people that are like, okay, I'm running my 15, I want exactly these classes. I think if classes were not, because like here's the difference. Like here's how like basically every Mythic Plus season has ever gone. Like look at these like bars at the top, like these ones just being extended, and then just notice how like I stopped extending here and how close all these other classes are. That's like basically what the game actually is every Mythic Plus season, except it might not actually be this many things. Like for example, the one season where like people ran like triple hunter and like triple windwalker and triple rogue and shit, it wasn't because like these other, like if those were the top class that like they were just just very slightly ahead of like these classes here. No, it looked like this. Like it was just, they were just so much better than everyone else that it wasn't even a conversation, and you just ran 3 of them. I really feel like I would actually love to go back and look at this. I feel like in like almost every Mythic Plus season that's ever existed, there's like a couple of problem class. I would say there's less than 4 or 5 bars that are above everyone else, and I think nerfing them, obviously buffing the ones at the bottom, I really think you could change the perception of what people see in Mythic Plus, because I really, really doubt this. Let me actually just delete this bar right here. All right, look at this. Look at this tuning. If this was the damage that you did in Mythic Plus, like yes, the damage difference between the top and the bottom. Let me okay, so if it looked like this, right? You had like classes at the top, and then it does fall off. Like the difference between the top and the bottom, you'd probably not want to bring this, and you would want to bring this. But the difference between 1 and like 7 and 8 is like not enough to where like you wouldn't invite that person to your key. And that's like a decent spread of classes up to that point. The only issue is that this has actually never happened in Mythic Plus, or even close. So like saying that it would happen is also a pipe dream. I understand that, but also it's not like it's the notion that people would still only invite, using just this picture, right, by the way, take all other logic out of it. The fact that people would still, that they would only invite this purple bar, this blue bar, and this green bar, just like they do now, is not true. Because in reality, what it is now is this. It's way higher than this. It's like this, and then like there's like one more, and there's like this guy's like close but not really, and then this guy's here, and then it's just like a massive fall off. So like there's a big reason why you'd only want to invite these higher ones.
So the way
Yeah,
I
that's
feel
exactly
about
my
that,
point.
I think this isn't true because in your experience playing in pugs, right? Like you said it yourself when you talk about warlocks. Like you go into pugs and it's just a total crapshoot whether or not your warlock does damage, right? Like you play with a warlock and he might do 8k overall or 18k or 38k, right? So the fact that to make that drawing and then say like, oh well, you know, let's say you play one of those middle of the road classes and then every single key you get into, you're just getting ripped by a warlock in a survival. Like that just doesn't happen for 99% of people who play this game. Like you go into a key, and if you're a good mage or you're a good demon hunter, like you just beat them. Or you do competitive damage.
I mean,
to
look
them,
at
right?
like look at my stream, right? Like I just started doing Mythic Plus for the first time in over a year, and like warlocks are fucking cracked beyond belief, right? When I play with Splat, and then when I play with like probably 1 out of 5 Mythic Plus locks, I would say they just crank me into oblivion. But
4 out of 5 don't.
You're going
right?
to be it's because it doesn't matter that they're playing a better class; they're just not as good. And or they just swap to it, right? And that's like true with most classes in the game. If you're talking at like the very, 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 very highest level,
right?
But that is something that someone in chat brought up that was really important. Is imagine if balance did look like this, right? So I just deleted the bars. It looks exactly like this. People would then the thing that would be the very big outlier, that the elephant in the room that you couldn't ignore, is how unbalanced this game's defensive and utility capabilities are as well. Because if damage was ever actually tuned to be this close, the utility and like defensive capability tuning in this game is like completely ridiculous. Like you can even see it sometimes within like people's specs. Have you guys ever raided with a fire mage that's been playing fire for years, and then like frost ends up being meta, and that player is permanently dead because they don't have Dreamweaver and Cauterize, and they're like, it's the same thing. People saw it at the beginning of this expansion. If you guys raided in Nyalotha, and you saw your hunters playing like BM with like crit corruption and shit, and they're like, oh man, this guy's such an insane player, and then they like queue up MM and Castle Nathria, and they're permanently dead because the class is harder and there's more to think about and you can't move as easily. Like that happens all the time. There's like huge diss. What would happen is if the game looked like this, you would take really strong utility, stuns, stops, obviously everything Rogue does, and then you'd take things with cheat deaths that can't die, right?
Well, so I have a question for Dorki. So I've heard you mention a couple times. My mind or my memory might be rattled, and I was also a lot worse at the game. But the whole idea of everyone played rogues in BFA, like season 2 especially. If I remember, I don't think Rogue was like, Rogue does so much damage. Like, what made Rogue good is it like had all those things.
It
definitely did a whole lot of damage.
I mean, it was doing more damage than every other spec. Like, it was that big of an outlier.
Yeah,
I might just be misremembering.
So here's what it was. So if it wasn't doing more than every other spec, the thing about Outlaw back then was that it was consistent. It was doing that damage every pack.
Well, right, yeah, that was the thing.
And then but then it also had like, the thing is like, there's obviously diminishing returns. Like bringing one rogue to a group and what that brings you versus bringing 3 is like majorly devalued at a certain point. So you have you would have run like 2 rogues plus X cranker class. You never run 3 of one class unless they're like de facto.
But what do you mean? But rogue was the highest damage.
It was actually 2 plus Windwalker.
Yeah, well, that's sort of what I'm saying though, right? Is like the idea of this season was totally batshit. Like, actually, I'm pretty sure the balance was not that bad if I remember.
No, the balance was bad.
I mean, you literally said it yourself: 2 rogues plus another class, right?
Yeah, but no, it's not because of the other class. It was a Windwalker, and it was only because they gave Mystic Touch. Yeah,
but also in the past, notice that the classes that have ever been brought as a 3 of, notably in like WoW's history, was BM Hunters.
When did people play 3 BM Hunters?
What was it?
It was an MDI
it was an MDI only.
It was exactly. It was MDI only.
BM Hunters.
The triple Windwalker and the triple Outlaw was the one that made it to live Mythic Plus. But the one thing about all 3 of those examples is all 3 of those have damage for every pull. Where like even when classes have been obscenely broken, like one of the most broken classes that's ever been in Mythic Plus was like a Venthyr Moonkin in like a previous patch, but it had to be heavily supported because you couldn't just have like rotating 3-minute cooldowns, right? Like it's too bursty and it's too uncommon. Where like it not only do you need a like classes to ever run a 3 of have to be damage for every pull, you're never like lacking damage, and then also they have to have like really good utility, which like Windwalkers and Rogues all do have that, right?
But your like idea of, oh, make every class balance, like chop off these outliers or whatever, like the outliers spawn from the diversity, right? And if there is no diversity about like what classes do, then you just end up playing 3 rogues, right? Because why wouldn't you play 3 rogues if every class did the same amount of damage?
Well, I don't like so the whole thing
and when you replace rogue, sorry, I'll let you go because I know I'm wrong about this, but like the class that has the, because like if every class is doing the same overall and looks the same on the meters, then you just want the class that's the most consistent, right? That's always has damage, and the tankiest class, right?
Yeah.
So, like, in BFA that was outlaw rogue, but anyway, Dorki, tell me why I'm wrong.
Yeah, so I would say for most people, I would say this is not true at all because most people are too stupid and they don't know how, like, they're not gonna look at, rogues are super tanky, let's bring a rogue. If you're pugging, chances are you'll play with whatever spec, as long as they have really good gear, they have really good IO, and it's competitive in damage. But obviously, if you're in the really high end, you would maybe look at playing specific specs that are really good for whatever you need in M+. I mean, in Shadowlands, it's quite different from BFA because in Shadowlands, there are a whole lot more requirements. Like, you would need a Lust in your group. You can't drums anymore. You probably need a Decurse. You probably need a Disease Dispel. You probably need a Soothe. You need all these little things, right? You probably need a Tricks, too, because aggro's dog shit in this game right now. So, like, you're going to have multiple different specs. There's no world where you can just play triple Destro Lock right now, as good as Destro Lock is, because Destro Lock is that one spec at the moment that is broken as fuck, but you're not going to see anyone playing triple Destro. Like, who's going to Soothe? Who's going to Lust? You know what I'm saying? Like, you're just going to bring classes that support your group, whether it's bringing a Chaos Brand or Arcane Intellect or
so like the RPG elements are good for the balance of the game then.
All right, chat, I'm about to make the most cooked take ever. All right, hold on.
Like, basically,
pull up the stream. All right. So here's
MS Paint going hard.
Here's my solution to class balance in WoW.
I'm
somehow
somehow
we find a way. Let me delete all this shit over here. Somehow we find a way to have overall ratings for people that are accurate. Because if you had someone sign up to your group right now and they were a Fodom Warlock, but they're like 4 out of 5 that you queue with and are totally awful, and they do like 7k overall and shit, like, you would know that, like, okay, I'm gonna take this Enhance who's a crazy fucking player instead of like this thing. But like the thing is there's no way, like, no one will ever be able to figure out a actual way to do that. But that would be the solution, dude. You'd always just take the best players.
No, I like what you're saying. Okay, here's the solution, right? We collab with Details, like the guy who make Details or whatever.
Yeah.
We add a new a column or whatever, and it's called skill rating. And now it's actually just a bullshit algorithm that just automatically puts all the classes really close together. And like some classes will be like 95 and some will be like 93. And it'll like, maybe change a little bit, but it's mostly just random. And then every streamer puts that on their stream. And then it just has the skill, and everyone's like, oh wow, well how do you get the skill rating? I gotta put that on mine too. And so then everyone just has skill rating, and then everyone is slowly over time convinced that every class is the same based off of this new skill rating that doesn't actually
It's a good take. I like it.
Yeah. Or I was also thinking that like maybe you just collab with Details and you have next to someone's IO score when they're signing up for your 15 to other side, you see what their average damage is in a key like that. The only issue with that is a very big one, and that would, and that would be that you guys, if you think you've seen degenerate greedy gameplay in the past, you would see. Actually, wait, if people were playing,
well,
like,
they gotta count deaths too.
If people, yeah, exactly, and deaths. If people were playing like extremely greedy, you'd see their deaths and you'd see their average damage, and then you'd know like, okay, this Warlock just signed up. He's a fucking stinker, even though his class is good. And this Enhanced Shaman, this Feral Druid that signed up actually is like a more reliable player than him. So then you're good.
Dude, Dorki would just become a millionaire because what we would do is we would just sell runs where Dorki just pulls the entire dungeon and then you just AoE only and everyone else sits there and you just end the key with like 200k overall. And you get like S++ Omega Raider IO score rating for just doing these keys and just doing like 200k overall.
I think this system would cause more problems than it would solve.
Oh yeah, it would. Oh yeah, it would. It would be hilarious. though.
Yeah, it would be hilarious.
Ultimately,
Can you
they just
imagine
needed
pugging
delete
keys
meters.
and seeing to what levels people do things? Like for me, right? Like as a DK, like I would always like instead of saving my dragon at the end of my pillar to hit the boss and the ad that spawns after you, like woe or whatever, I'm just gonna send it on pull so it hits 4 things
On the
instead of
relics,
2.
rip it, dude.
Yeah, I'm just gonna hit all the relics instead.
Could you imagine the toxicity that tanks and healers would get? Imagine you're playing Frosty K and you just die 2 seconds into your breath on the biggest pull, and you know that your Raider IO ranking score is just falling down. You're just like, this stupid idiot healer just let me die. Like, this is the reason my rating is so bad. Like, dude, that would be so toxic. There's no way.
And also, I think we've talked about this before, but just straight up having a commendation system where at the end of your dungeon, you can choose to commend one player, but like it can't be people you've grouped up with in your own group. Like it could only be someone that you grouped up with like just through the group finder that you have no affiliation with whatsoever. And
Yo, wait,
like,
has that ever
obviously,
worked in any MMO or game?
Doesn't Final Fantasy have that?
Final Fantasy has that, but like define work because it like doesn't matter because they don't have
doesn't do
competitive
anything.
dungeons, so it doesn't do
Yeah.
anything in Final Fantasy. Yeah.
That's fair.
But like in this game when like people actually like have to choose who you're signing up with in a group, like seeing the amount of commendations someone has could help, but then also you could just like pay to get commendation boosted and like you would just join groups and like someone's full-time job would be just like constantly commending you over and over again.
It'd just be like plus 15 commend for commend, and everyone would just join the group and just slam out a miss and just commend all of each other and then just go again the next key.
No, dude, you don't commend each other. You buy the boost and you get 4 commends per run.
Oh, this is
You
like a
just farm that shit up
score loop
huge.
testing. Yeah.
If anything, the more commends
Like-
the player has, the more suspicious it is. You like see a guy who's like only done 15s and has like a million commends, and you're just like, I'm gonna avoid this guy.
All right, there we are delving into some Bong Cloud take territory. So
Oh,
we're gonna.
yeah.
I think this is time for this to end. This was cool as fuck though. I like this a lot. Thanks for coming, Kalamazi, and
Hey, thanks.
obviously Dorki and Growl. We do this all the time.
Yeah, word.
Yeah,
When's should we just do like a weekly podcast at this point? I feel like this is the
Weekly,
next
oh,
logical
What I
step.
like to
You
do.
Tiny Force
Here's what
podcast.
I like to do. I like to just. Cause like I used to like just rip my stream and then like something would happen and then I'd be like, all right, let's talk about it. And I would talk about it. I just find it way more interesting to call usually new and different people all the time, and especially people who are like knowledgeable on the exact subject. Or
Yeah,
have,
but
or have like
unfortunately-
a different take, and that only sometimes goes bad when you like invite JB and he just rips the most wild shit you've ever heard in your life. But like yeah, no, it's actually really fun. I really like doing that. And you guys are my Mythic Plus mainstays and other stuff. That was a good talk, though. I like doing that. That's my new thing on my channel that I like doing. There's no preparation for it whatsoever. I do not message anyone to talk to me until my stream is already on. And then if there's anything to talk about, I just invite people from the community that I think would be cool to talk. And I like to mix it up and talk with a bunch of new people and hear their takes.